Welcome to the third episode in this VR series. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to create an animation sequence in Unreal Engine 5.4. Now, this tutorial on animation sequences will work in whether it's a third-person environment, first-person game, or in this case, a VR environment. And there's several different ways that you can trigger this animation sequence. One is through the custom menu. So as I click on the menu on my left controller, you'll see there's Play Tour. The other way that you can trigger it is by walking into a specific area, and I'll show you how to do that. And then I also added a custom keyboard command to play the tour so that as you're building your VR environment, you can use your keyboard to try out certain things without putting on your headset. So to play the tour, I pulled the menu back up and I'm just going to click on Play Tour in VR. And here is a short little animation sequence that I'm going to show you how to create in Unreal Engine. So in this episode, we're going to learn how to customize this menu by adding this button, and we're also going to learn some other blueprints and animation sequences. Let's dive in. Let's go ahead and start off with how to build an animation sequence. Now, I have created other videos on this on my channel, but this one I'm going to do specifically for the museum, and I thought I'd start with a pretty simple animation sequence. This one I'm calling Show and Tell. So let me open up this sequence right here, and this is the animation sequence that I'm going to show you essentially how to create. And let me just zoom in. Now, one of the things I want to show you is how do you create an animation sequence in the first place, because I have a custom folder here. So if you're working in your own project, just go to the content folder, right click, and create a new folder, and I would give it the name Custom Animation. And that's where you should put your animation sequences. How do you make an animation sequence? Well, it's right under this menu right here. If you remember, this is the menu where you can place objects into your environment. This is the menu where you can open the level blueprint and create other blueprints. And this is the animation sequence. So I just added a level sequence, and that's how I get to Show and Tell. And I've placed it in this folder. So let me go ahead and add a level sequence, and I'll call this one Tutorial, and click on Save. And I want to make sure that I do put that in the animation sequence folder. So that's why you want to make the folder first. Now, how did I add this camera into my environment? Well, there's a couple ways that you can do it. First way is you can come over to the animation sequencer and just create a new camera from this button. I will sometimes use that method, but what I typically do is go up to the menu up here where you can quickly add to your project, and I go down to Cinematic and I just choose a Cine Camera Actor. Either way does the exact same thing, and when I click that, there's my camera right there. And I often do it that way because I like to kind of look at where I'm going to put the camera, and then I put it right there. So you can see this camera right here, and over in the right-hand corner, you can see what the camera is seeing, and here's the name of it over in my project. I would recommend renaming it by clicking on right-click, and then going to Edit and choosing Rename, so you have a general idea of where these cameras are in your environment. I'll skip that step for now. With that camera selected, all I have to do is drag it into my animation sequencer, and I can create a sequence for that camera. This is the starting location, and if you'll notice up here in the top left corner, it says Pilot Actor. I'm actually inside the camera, so if I move around clicking on my right mouse and change what the camera's looking at, I can actually pilot the camera. And the reason I want to do that is that when I get the camera exactly at the starting location, maybe right here against this left wall, I can open up the transform down here and click on this little keyframe. So clicking on this keyframe marks the position where the camera is now. Now I'm just going to pan to my right. And to pan to my right, I'm using my left and right mouse, and I'm just moving across. Now you'll notice when I do that, it's a little hard to keep the camera angle exactly just panning left to right like it's on a dolly from a movie. And you'll see in the location area that the numbers for red, green, and blue for the X, Y, and Z axis are also moving. Those are the rotation up, down, left, right. So if you want to make sure that you just pan exactly left to right, I can move out here, go to my stopping location, maybe it's right there, and I can look and see the green value and maybe just type -4,000, and that's exactly where I want it. So if I go back to my original keyframe for the camera, and the way to do that is just by clicking the back button. So that's this little back button right here to the front is where I started. Before I move the camera right, I do want to point out that right now the timeline up here at the top is in frames. And unless you're some kind of mathematical genius and you can do the computation so quick, I find it easier to go to this drop-down menu where it says 30 frames per second because 4 seconds would be 120 frames. Just go up here, go to show time as, and then change it to seconds instead of frames. And if you do any video editing, you know that for someone watching a video, anything less than 1.5 seconds is really short. 2 seconds is a short clip, but 4 seconds is a pretty good edit. So I'm going to move my playhead to 4 seconds right here. And now I'm going to go to the green, which is my x-axis, and type -4000, because when I piloted the camera, I noticed that that was the number that was a really good position for moving it to the right. And then what I'll do with the playhead right here is come over to transform and click another keyframe, and that has marked the location, rotation, and scale of the camera. I did all three in this one keyframe click. So if I slide all the way back, hit the space button, it shows that right pan of that camera. Now, if you need more time in your timeline, don't forget you can hold down the left control button on your keyboard and roll your mouse to zoom in and out. And I'm going to move out this red right side to 8 seconds so that I have an 8-second sequence. Now I'm going to need another camera because I've done my first one. Well, how do I add another camera? Pretty easy. Just go to the location that I want, and maybe I want to pan these objects right here. Start my camera right there. Let me add a camera into it. By the way, if you want to eject the current camera you're looking at, just do that. Now, since I didn't mark anything, that camera has gone back to where it originally is, but I'm going to add a new camera. To add another camera, let me just collapse the first camera. And as I said before, I would give names to these so you know where they are. We'll explain what this camera cuts is in just a moment, but let me add a new camera. So this time I'll go to the camera button here and click on it, and it's put a camera into my scene. And now we have our second camera. You notice that if you don't give it names, things get a little confusing. And notice that when I add it one way, it has a space. And when I add it the other way, it didn't have a space. So it can be really confusing because it does it in different ways. So this time I am going to, with the camera selected, rename it. And I'll just call this like statue camera. All right. And if I need to find that camera, I can just type it right there. So I am piloting the camera, and like with the other scene, I want to pan from left to right. So let's go ahead with, at 4 seconds, right when the other camera is done, I'm going to set up a new transform spot of right here. And then I'm going to just move to the left, like I did before, decide where I want the camera to end, kind of note that that's at -6,384. This is where the first location is right there of the camera. And I'm going to move out to 8 seconds and type -6384. And it's panned across. And I will now click on the keyframe right here for the transform. Now to go back all the way to the beginning, I can click this left bracket, and that will move me back. If I want to go to the next one, takes me right there, or skip to the end. Let's go all the way to the beginning, hit play, and you'll notice that nothing is happening right now. And you're like, wait, where's that first camera? And now the second camera kicks in. Well, I want you to picture that you are on a film set and you have a couple people with different cameras on that set. One is the director, and he or she is sitting in a chair. That's what this director cut up here is. If I click on that camera, the director sees what everybody's cameras are doing. So when I go to the front and I click on play now, the director is seeing that first camera. And then when it gets to the end of that sequence, they don't see anything else because we haven't added a camera cut to that. So this camera right here is one photographer, and this camera is another photographer. And if I want to see each of those sequences independently, you just click on that particular camera. And if you click on that particular camera in the sequence, you'll see what's happening. So remember, this camera came in later in the sequence, and this camera over here was at the beginning of our sequence. And so these are all of our different camera people, and the director gets to watch. Well, the first one was automatically added, but if I want to add another camera at 4 seconds, I just come to this little plus and I say, this time I want the statue camera. And now you'll see when I click on the director's, let's call this like the director's little viewport. When I go back to the beginning and I hit my space bar, the director sees the first camera person and now the second camera person. And I like that analogy because it helps me remember that I've got to click on these different cameras when I want to see something. And if the director doesn't see a particular sequence, it's because we haven't added that up here. So that's how you create your basic animation sequence. You can do all kinds of things. Like you can animate actors in your scene. You can add animations to various objects. You could make a camera if you wanted to, pan around a particular area. You can do really all kinds of things. So if I wanted to have a camera that panned around this is really hard for me to do. I do fly drones, but I can't with my mouse kind of pan around. But let's say you wanted to fly around that object or look down and up. You can do all kinds of things by playing with your camera's transformations, the rotations, the locations, that type of stuff. But you can animate sequences as well. So with that animation sequence as a little sample, I'm going to close this because I've already made one and mine is called Show and Tell. So I'm going to go to the tutorial one that I made for you guys and I'm just going to hit delete because I'm really not using that anywhere else. I've already set up the blueprint to call my Show and Tell. But that's the basics of making animation with various cameras. And the idea that I have for the museum, whether it's whatever VR environment you have, is that when the user enters your environment, that you give them a little tour. And in that tour, you tell them what's going on. Let me open up Show and Tell, the animation sequence that I created earlier, and you notice there's no audio to this. So if I did actually want audio to play while the tour is happening, I would simply come up here to do add, and I would add an audio track. And then, of course, you need to use a sound editor, as I've shown in some of my other videos, to record an audio, and then you would just add that in here. So here's my audio, and if I click on plus, I can choose what the audio is. I have my little Disney wedding track, so it doesn't make any sense to do this, but let me click play now. It was an incredible wedding at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World, Florida. You're like, wait, we're not seeing anything happening. How come? Let me turn on the director's camera, roll back, and here we go. It was an incredible wedding at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World, Florida. All right, so you would create an audio file that goes along with the tour and play that in here. The other thing that you can always do is you can create a video in a video editor, and you can call that video into the viewport if you want to do animations or tours that way. That's certainly a whole nother option. I'm not covering that in this video, but I did want to give you that idea, that concept that you can pre-record a tour and then just play the video in the viewport for someone. Different way to do it. Let me delete this audio file, audio track rather. The file is still in the project. And I'll close the sequence. Now, how am I playing the animation sequence? Well, in this case, I've got 3 different ways I'm doing it. One is through this trigger volume. The other is through the custom menu that you saw. And the third is from a keyboard command. Now, on a keyboard command, that's not going to necessarily work in VR because you're using your VR controllers. You're not sitting at your keyboard. So you'd have to do some really custom things to do that. But the reason I do have it in this blueprint is so that I can test it out. So I'm going to go to level blueprint and I'm going to show you what we're going to learn today because I think this could be a great way for you to learn is to already see the blueprint and then how did I make it. So this is the tour that plays when I hit T on my keyboard. And we'll just take this blueprint right now, and I'm just going to move it down here so we focus on this one. And there's our blueprint. Well, how did I make that? Well, let's first talk what it does. When I press T on my keyboard for tour, you can pick any key you want, as long as it's not being used for something else. But in VR, your keyboard's not being used, but this is fine. I then play a level sequence, and there's the player that is called. I create a level sequence rather, and player, and then I play it. and I'm passing through the variable of what is being played. So how do I do that? Pretty simple. First of all, I want to set up my keystroke. So I right click and I can type in the word key. You can see all the various keyboard commands that you have underneath here. So if I pick T for tour, that's what's going to happen when I press the T key. Let's go ahead and watch it though really quick. Let me just delete this one. Click compile, click save, and I'll click play, but I'm not going to put on my VR goggles. So I'm going to choose to play in the selected viewport up here rather than in VR. And if I hit T on my keyboard, you'll notice that animation sequence plays. And instead of putting on and off your VR goggles all the time and checking out what it looks like, you can create a keyboard to do that for your tour if you want to just take a look at it. So again, to create that blueprint, let me open up the level blueprint, and I will just simply right click and type keyboard, and I can pick the key event that I want. There's the T on my keyboard, and there we have. So I want to create a level sequence after that's played. Just right click and type create level sequence player. By the way, if you don't see that, don't forget to check or uncheck your context sensitive setting there. And I'll pick that. And then I just say from left to right. When I hit T, do this. Well, what level sequence do I want? Use my drop-down menu, pick show and tell. If that does not show up here, well, you haven't created your sequence yet. I've already created this one, so I can choose it. So now to add the play function, you could right-click and type the word play, but you're going to have a huge list of different things that have the word play in it. A little difficult. So what I recommend you do is, since we have some context, I want to create a level sequence player, and then I want to play it. As I drag off, Unreal is smart enough that with this checkbox checked, I can type play, and it brings up the right function right here. It's a function with play, and if I choose it, you'll notice it looks just like the one above. Target is a movie scene sequence player. Now, if you notice, there's the white line that goes between, but the one up here has this little piece below. Well, how did that come from it? I need to tell this function right here what to play. I've created the level sequence player in my project, but I need to play it. And so I need to take the out actor and connect it over here to target. That way this node knows what I'm talking about, puts this little piece right here, and I can just pull it down. Then you can click on compile, and then save, and that's how this blueprint is created. And as I've said in other lessons, this is such a common one. You might want to take a screen capture and put it in a Word document or whatever note system that you use to create something like this, because it's very common. Now, when you've got a bunch of different nodes like this, just like commenting, if you are in programming, you know that comments really help you understand what things do. And if you're not a programmer, here's what I mean. Draw a box around that blueprint, and then right click and say create comment from the selection. And this says, I can type whatever I want, plays animation tour sequence. And now I know what this does. All right. I've got two of them, which I do not need. So I would certainly want to delete one of them. So I'll draw a box around this one, hit backspace, click compile, click save, and I've now have that. And now I can grab this box and move it wherever I want. The other way that I can play that animation sequence is from the menu. And the custom menu that I created for you all is under the VR pawn. So if you go to VR template and you click on blueprints, in this folder, you've got my widget menu right here. And again, if you didn't hear earlier, I have a link to this entire project for you to download in the description of this video. So that has all the custom menus and the custom movement controls, like the fading movement, the dash movement, and the walking movement. So if you haven't downloaded this project, I'd highly recommend you grab it. So this button has been added, and it's really easy to add a button into your environment. So if I grab the button control and just put it at the bottom, I can add a new button right there. And then if I want to put text, I just come over to the text field, which is right here, and then I drag it into there, and I can name that what I want. Let me just do Control Z and undo that and undo the button. And that's what I did to add this Play Tour button. So I just added a button. These little arrow controls right here enable you to move the button up and down in the menu. And this is the menu that comes up when I tap the button on my left controller. So how am I playing the tour from here is that when I click this button, I want it to play the tour. So if I scroll all the way down, notice there's a menu item that is where you can call when the button is clicked. Now be careful that you haven't selected the text or you're not going to get that at the bottom. You have to make sure that you select the button. And then on clicked, notice there's a sequence that is being played. Here's the button, and this should look really familiar to you. So when I click the button, the create the level sequence player and play, and then remove it from the parent. Now, when you have a menu like this and you click on clicked, it will automatically go to the blueprint and create the button for you. And then you have to add in these other commands. So in this one, just follow what I did in the other one, but then remove from parent at the end. And if you notice the description here, it removes the widget from its parent. This widget was added to the player's screen or the viewport. It will also be removed from those containers. We need to add that because we're working in VR. So that is the second way that we're playing the tour. And I think that that is a probably best practice as opposed to just walking into an area, because as I'll show you right here with this trigger volume, the way that I did that is by walking into this box. And each time the player walks into this box area, it will just automatically play. So depending on your environment, maybe that's going to work for you. Maybe you start them off in a lobby room and then they leave the lobby room after it plays and you wanted to know how to do that. I'm not sure, but I wanted to show you all three ways. So how do I make a trigger volume that plays the sequence? Well, it's the same way that we made trigger volumes over here for the photo audio and the trigger volume over here. So we just literally go up to the menu up here where we can add items to our project. We go down to volumes and we choose a trigger volume. And by putting that volume in our area, as I did right here, we can use it that when you walk into it, it plays. And what I want to point out, if you notice, is I'm working with two blueprints. I'm working with the level blueprint, but I also was working with the blueprint for the widget menu. So when I open up my widget, there's a graph, and that's the blueprint for the widget. I don't know why they don't use the word blueprint right here off graph, but you will find, of course, at times there are some inconsistencies in the terminology or just maybe intentional inconsistencies. But there is a blueprint in the widget, but there's also a level blueprint. And in this case, we're using the level blueprint because it is a blueprint that associates with the actors inside of this level, as opposed to code that is associated with the menu. Think about it. I could have many different levels for my VR environment. I can pull up this menu in any level. And so it doesn't matter where I am in my VR environment, I've got this menuing system, and that's why the blueprint is attached to the widget. But in this case, I'm doing something in this particular level, and that's this trigger volume. So I'm going to open up the level blueprint, and you'll notice that we've got the animation sequence that we were looking at earlier. But up here, I've got one that says on actor begin overlap, and it's walkthrough. So the name of this trigger volume right here, if you'll notice, is trigger volume underscore walkthrough. Now, how did I make this blueprint? First, I want to explain what the blueprint does, which should be a very quick explanation because we already know that we are creating a level sequence player and we're playing it and the attached variable is getting passed through. How did I make this? Well, with the trigger volume selected, you can do it here from the menu or you can click on it, of course. With that selected, I just right click in my blueprint area and I can do this drop down right here. Context sensitive is checked. Go to collision and say on actor begin overlap. And that's how that node was created. Now you may be wondering, can I copy and paste objects from within my blueprint? You certainly can. So I could shift select these three items, copy them. I did Control C, and then paste them. I did Control V, and I can take that and just bring it across. So you don't have to recreate the work that you've done if you've already made some nodes. And that's a fast way to create these variations of what I did. So on the overlap or on the keyboard. Let me just hit delete because I don't need that. So we've got 3 different ways to trigger the animation sequence. When I walk into the box is one way. When I type T on my keyboard is another way. And then the menu was the third way. There's 2 other blueprints that I want to make sure I call to your attention. And that is this one, which is, what is this M key doing? The M key is bringing up the menu. So I've created in the level blueprint a way to pull up the menu by clicking on the M key. And the reason that I did that is, again, sometimes I don't like putting on my headset for testing certain things. So now when I click play without my headset on and I click on M, the menu comes up. And so I can click on play tour and see it from here if I want to test my menu without putting my headset on. So that's why I created this, just so I can test certain parts of the menu. By the way, when you click play, because you won't hear some of my clicking, I have to click into this window to activate it. And then when I type M on my keyboard, the menu will come up. If you miss that and you just simply click on play and do M, the menu is not coming up right now as I'm hitting M. I need to just click into this window so that the mouse is active. And that will come up. The other blueprint that we want to take a look at relates to the video training that I did for you on setting up this museum and this box way over here. When I did the earlier video on how you can walk into this box, I didn't show you that when you walk out of the box, how to stop the sequence from playing. So I just want to make sure that you see that I have updated that. And I want to show you that for 2 reasons. One, in case you need to do the same thing in your environment. Or if you are downloading this, I just wanted to call your attention that I have changed the blueprint for this. So if you notice, on actor begin overlap is when it opens and starts beginning playing the Disney Tower. But I've added an on actor overlap when you leave that box. And then I added close, the close command, and just hooked media player to the target in both. So I updated that for you. And if you're downloading this project, you will get the latest version of that. But if you were wondering earlier how to do that, this would be the proper blueprint to start and stop a video when you enter it. And I want to give a big shout out to Fish Tank Studio, who is a member of our Discord channel, which if you're not, be sure to look in the description and join the Discord channel because there's a lot of good conversation that goes over in the Eric VTuber Discord channel. And he was the one I said, hey, I forgot to do this. And he did it in his, sent me a picture of it, and I've updated it here. So thank you, Barney at Fish Tank Studios. So again, feel free to download this project and play around with it. You can use and leverage the blueprints. I showed you guys that you can, within a blueprint, copy and paste, but you can also copy and paste blueprints across different projects. So if you're working in your own VR environment, but you want some of these blueprints, you can copy them across. That can create some problems because, like in this particular one, if you brought it across, it wouldn't have the setting right here for what sequence to play. So you may have to tweak yours a little bit, but if you just want to copy and paste nodes across, you can do that. Coming up in future videos is going to be a focus on interaction. I'm going to show you how you can interact in your VR environment. We've covered a lot in these first couple videos, and if you haven't watched the first ones, highly recommend you do that. And I want to thank you guys for all of your feedback. I love the comments that you were giving on the YouTube channel. I respond to, I think, every single one of them. And again, I encourage you to join the Discord channel. Next video, like I said, is going to focus on interaction. So how, not just walking up to things, but how you can interact with your environment using your hands or using controllers. I think that's going to be a great video. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, be sure you are. And hey, it means a lot to me if you can click on that like button, drop a comment. That's how I know that you are out here in the world. And I really appreciate you guys doing that.